Good morning, everyone. In today's session, we will be looking into the model of strategic implementation, issues which is there in strategic implementation, phases of project, procedural implementation, resource allocation, and strategic budget. So let's see what is model of strategic implementation. Before going to the model, let us see which are the things which should be kept in mind or issues which should be considered when we are dealing with strategic implementation. Basically, there are six. First one is project implementation, procedural implementation, resource allocation, structural implementation, functional implementation, and behavioral implementation. So, project, procedure, resource, structure, functional, behavioral implementations. These are the six issues that you should be considering when you are planning for a strategic implementation. Now we will see the framework. So if you have seen, once the strategic plan is formulated, you have to come up with or activate the strategies using project implementation, procedural implementation, and resource allocation. Project implementation is the plans and policies and the projects which are needed in order to implement the strategy. So taking care of that one will be the project implementation. What are the policies and procedures which should be followed will be dealt in procedural implementation. This will be mainly dealt with the different acts or laws which will be governing the different factors in strategic implementation. And resource allocation, how we are allocating the resources like men, material, mission, money, and other aspects. How we are planning that, including time, how it is done, is resource allocation. If you have seen this one, this is more about structural implementation as behavior and behavioral implementation. Structural implementation in the sense it will be how much our organization is structured so that it can promote the strategy, smooth implementation of the strategies. That is what is coming under structural implementation. And behavioral implementation, as told in the earlier ones, the key factors being structure, then behavior and structure, behavior, and strategy. In this one implementation, again we will be maintaining what will be the behavior, how we should enhance the employees, or what should be the communication channel, how the culture should be maintained in the corporate world. All those things will have an influence in the strategic implementation that is covered under this one. And the last one is functional implementation. That is how you are communicating to the lower level management or departments in order to the efficient working of the strategies which are already planned. And the last one is evaluation control. So as told, there are six issues which we have to keep in mind when we are coming with strategic implementation. First one is project, second one is procedure, third one is resource allocation, fourth one is structural implementation, the fifth one is behavioral implementation, and the last one is functional implementation. Hope you understood. So let's see again once more: project, procedural, resource, structural, functional, and behavioral aspects. So let's see what you mean by project. Okay. According to the Project Management Institute of US, a project is defined as a one-shot, time-limited, goal-directed major undertaking requiring the commitment of varied skills and resources. That is called as a project. A project will have its own goals and objectives. The project passes through various phases before a set of tasks can be accomplished. So how strategic implementation can be done through project implementation? Just let us see. So in the strategic implementation phase, we will be initiating the project which will be already being started in the formulation stage, and it will be planning, execution, controlling will be done, and the project will be completed. In this one, the project will have to have certain project objectives as well as certain control measures will be in place, so that the full project management process is being evaluated and controlled. Okay, so this is about the strategic implementation through project management. So I hope you understood. Initiating the process or initiating the project will be started in the formulation state, and it will be continuing. And initiating, planning, executing, and controlling as the main process which comes under project management. And in the we have to make sure that the project objective is communicated and it is done based on the project objective, and to ensure that the implementation is done properly, strategy, evaluation, and control will be done. It will be done through different control measures which will be put in place. So that is about strategic implementation through project management. Now let's see the different phases of project. Okay, there are 5 phases in a project. First is called consumption phase. Second one is definition. Third one, planning and organizing phase. Fourth, implementation. And the last one, cleanup phase. So what is consumption phase? It is an extension of the strategy formulation phase of strategic management. Basically, the ideas generated during the process of strategic alternatives and choice consideration will be undertaken as future projects, and the project ideas that are conceived have to be allocated priorities on the basis of which they will be chosen for the further development, which one to choose, when to choose. So that is what happens in conception phase. In definition phase, after we identify a set of project, we will be prioritizing it, and based on certain preliminary project analysis. And after this analysis is done, we will be checking the financial institutions whether they will be giving financial help, or getting, is it feasible for the project to be conducted. So feasibility studies in depth will be conducted, and detailed reports will be generated in definition phase. After the project definition phase, the project is cleared for implementation. So once the idea comes in, and once you have decided which project to be taken, we will be defining regarding the feasibility, and you will be analyzing the project in a in-depth manner. Once that is done, then starts the planning and organizing phase. In planning and organizing phase, detailed planning related to different aspects of the projects will be done, like infrastructure, engineering design, schedules, budgets, finance, and whatever is required in order to complete the project. Those things will be planned, and the project structure, which would deal with the organization and manpower systems and procedure, everything will be charted down, and the project manager will be responsible to the planning and organizing of the project. Then the next stage is implementation stage. The detailed engineering, order placement for equipment and material, awarding contracts, other types of construction, the requirement of the plant, commissioning of the plant, trial, testing, all these things will be done in the implementation phase. And the last phase is cleanup phase, the final phase in project implementation. This is basically deals with disbanding the project infrastructure and handing over the plant to the operating personnel. Once everything is implemented, you will be starting executing the project, that is called cleanup phase. So basically the 5 different phases are conception, definition, planning and organization, implementation, and cleanup phase. Cleanup phase is when the project will be made viable for the operating personnel to work upon that. Okay, so these are the different phases of project. Okay, now these things will be coming under the first one, which is project implementation. The second one is called procedural implementation. Any organization which is planning to implement strategies must be aware of the procedural framework within which the plans, programs, projects can be approved by the government, central, state, and local levels. So the procedural framework is very much important. Basically, you have to see whether what are the acts which should be considered when you are coming up with your strategy. What are the laws which concerns with this particular strategy? So you should be aware or thorough with what are the procedures which should be followed in order to implement the strategies. So there are many acts. I have included only 4 acts in this one. Apart from that, all other acts which are coming under which will be or which should be considered is in detail explained in your notes. So please go through that one. For the time being, these are the important acts which will be considered. For example, Securities Contract Act. It is the main purpose is to prevent undesirable transaction in security by regulating the business. There is FEMA Act of 1999. There is Foreign Trade Act of 1992, Industry Act of 1951, and there are many more. Which are influencing the procedural implementation, like Indian Contract Act of 1872, Sales of Goods Act of 1930, Indian Patents Acts of 2005, Company Act, Competition Act, Trademark Act, Information Technology Act 2000, which you have already studied in e-business, Consumer Protection Act, Industrial Dispute Act, Factories Act, Trade Union Act, uh, Bureau of Indian Standards, that is nothing but quality certification, which is being needed for ensuring the quality perspective. So these are certain things which should be taken care in procedural implementation. So first one was project implementation, where we will be looking into the plans and projects which we will be implementing. The second one is procedural implementation, where whatever laws are there in different levels, say central, state, and local level, you should be aware of before going into the strategy. And apart from this, some of the regulatory elements which we have to look into is these ones: formation of company. There are certain laws or acts which we have, or procedures which we have to follow. Then licensing procedure is there, SEBI requirements are there, foreign collaboration procedures, FEMA, import export requirements, patenting and trademark requirement, labor legislator requirements, environmental protection, consumer protection requirements, incentives and facilities which are given to the workforce which comes into play. All those things should be properly seen. And in this one, if you check into your exam point of view, patents and trademark requirement is one of the major ones, and you should be aware of the various acts which will influence in the decision of strategies. Then next one being, so first we have seen the project implementation, second procedural implementation. The third one is resource allocation. Okay, resource allocation. Okay, so resource allocation is very important because we are having resources in scarce. So the planning should be promptly done so that the resources can be easily allocated. And resource allocations mainly deals with procurement, allotment, and optimum use of resources. It is both one time and continuous process. Sometimes once allocated it will go down, but sometimes it is a continuous process. In this one, again, financial and fiscal resources are allocated through budgeting. So let's see what is strategic budgeting. Okay. Okay, that we will be dealing with. So let's, before going to the strategic budgeting, let me tell what are the different factors which will influence the resource allocation. Okay, the first one is objective of the organization. Setting up of objective is complex. The importance of a particular goal or task or objectives is judged by the employees on the basis of the amount of resources allocated by the firm. There will be objectives and it should be properly communicated, and it will be made into operating objectives so that it is easily attainable. Then the second one is preference of the strategist. Based on the preferences of the person who is making, or the top management who is making the strategies, based on their preferences, it will determine the resource allocation. Next one, internal politics. Of course, wherever we are, where there will be certain people who will be possessing more power, and there will be some ways by which this will be uh, influencing in resource allocation. So some departments of businesses will be more powerful and they will be getting more resource allocation. So those are internal politics. The next one is internal policies. Internal policies are based on negotiations and bargaining, affects the resource allocation. How the each department or each unit or each operating functional units are able to negotiate themselves and bargain for the resource allocation. So that is the fourth factor. Then fifth one is the external influences. The demands of the stakeholder also affect the resource allocation. Legal requirements may require additional resource allocation. So based on all those factors, the resources will be allocated. So basically, the factors which will be affecting resource allocation are objectives of the organization, preference of the strategies, internal politics, internal policies, and external influences. Now, let's see what is strategic budget and how it is allocated. Why it is so difficult to come up with difficulties in resource allocation. First thing is the resources are scarce. Second one is there will be internal restrictions. Then there will be competitors who are playing within and outside. So these things makes it very difficult. So how this strategic budget is made? So basically, first the objective of the company will be set, and these policies, and based on this policies, the top management will be based on the executive management, based on their recommendation, they will be allocating the budget. And it can be for desired long run and as well as short run. So once that is done, the resource availability will be checked, and if the desired long and short run goals, if it is going to apart, so we will be trying to minimize the gaps using operational plans. Proposals will be sent. Based on that, the strategic budget will be allocated. And this again, this there is another factor which will be playing a vital role, that is the resource availability. Once the budget is formed, it will be approved and then it will be implemented. So this is the steps involved in strategic budget. So mainly the first step is the top management will initiate the budgeting process. Second one is each will be communicated to different departments. Each unit or departments will prepare a preliminary budget for the next period, and this preliminary budgets will be reviewed by the top managers, and then the budget department will be allocating the fund, and summary of budgets are usually prepared, and the projected receipts and expenses are put together, and based on that, that budget will be framed and the budget will be allocated. So first one, top management will be initiating the budget process by communicating the objectives of the firm for the period. Then based on the budget department, each department will be planning and they will be submitting a preliminary budget there. Then it will be analyzed, and based on that analysis, final one with the receipts, detailed receipts and expenses will be charted down, and you will be allocating the budget. So these are the steps involved in budgeting process. Okay, so in this session we have come across what are the different things which we have to issues we have to consider when we are implementing a strategy. So in this one we have there are six: project implementation, procedure implementation, resource allocation, structural implementation, functional implementation, and behavioral implementation. In project implementation, again we have seen the different phases of project. What are the factors which will influence the phases of projects, and what is procedural implementation, what are the different acts we just glimpsed on it, and then we have the factors which will affect the resource allocation, and finally strategic budget. So that's all about this module. In case you have any doubts, please feel free to ask. Thank you.